Karen thought she was returning to the life she once ruled. A pristine home, a compliant neighborhood, her throne of bylaws. But the world had moved on. Her house was no longer hers. The man she tried to destroy now owned everything. And this time, she would follow his rules or fall.
They say time heals all wounds, but whoever came up with that never had a neighbor like Karen. I hadn't thought about her in months, maybe even years. The silence had been too sweet. But when I saw the name Karen M. Bradshaw scribbled on the manila envelope that landed on my porch that morning, I knew the calm was officially over. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I'd heard the news already. Karen had been released early. Some good behavior clause mixed with an overcrowded prison system and a judge who clearly hadn't lived next door to her. She was supposed to be gone for another 18 months. Instead, she was back on the streets, breathing free air, and probably already planning her next HOA coup. I sipped my coffee on the porch, leaned back, and let my eyes drift toward the neighborhood beyond the ridge. The rooftops of Maple Grove shimmered in the morning haze. Houses I now owned. All of them. 16 properties. The same HOA-controlled domain where Karen had once ruled like a pastel-blazered tyrant, where she'd tried to get me thrown out, fined, arrested, humiliated, and now every brick of that suburb reported back to me. Poetic? Sure. Petty? Absolutely. I never planned it that way. After Karen's conviction and the PR disaster that swallowed the HOA, property values in the area sank like a stone in a storm drain. Foreclosures, fire sales, and I, ever the opportunist with a healthy grudge and even healthier liquidity, started buying. Quietly. One address at a time. But this morning wasn't about the past. This morning was about her. I could already picture her stepping out of that Uber with the same purse she used to swing like a weapon at HOA meetings. Her hair cut into that severe angled bob that somehow made her look like she was always on the verge of demanding to see someone's manager. I imagined her face the moment she realized her old throne had been torched and replaced with a lease agreement signed by a property manager she'd never met. I didn't have to imagine long. Around 10:30, my property manager at what used to be her house, now unit number 12 in my portfolio, sent me a blurry photo of a woman standing on the porch with 2 suitcases and a face that looked like she had just bitten into a lemon wrapped in betrayal. Her hands were on her hips, arguing with the tenant coordinator, who I'd specifically instructed to keep things polite but firm. Karen, it turned out, had no idea the house had been auctioned off during her incarceration. The seizure wasn't just about her criminal charges, it was about back taxes, unpaid legal fees, and a mountain of civil judgments from neighbors she'd tormented for years. The state had no problem letting the house go. I just happened to be the highest bidder with the coldest smile. To my eternal amusement, she had booked a short-term room rental there through a third-party site. The irony practically sang. Karen was now renting a bedroom in the house she once tried to have me evicted from. The tenant coordinator told her she could stay, under the same terms as any other guest. That didn't go down well. She shouted something about legal ownership and fraud, tried name-dropping a city councilman whose name hasn't meant anything since Bush was in office, and even threatened to call the police. When informed, the police had already been called on her. More than once in that house, she finally fell silent. I took a walk that afternoon, drove by Maple Grove in my nondescript gray truck, with the tinted windows rolled down. I saw her through the slats of the new privacy fence, dragging her suitcase across the pebbled walkway with a gait that said she still believed she ran the place. Same Karen, same stubborn energy, Only now, no one was listening. No one was bowing. No one was afraid. Neighbors peered out from their windows like they'd spotted a ghost. Some looked amused, some concerned. A few kids down the street laughed and pointed. One of them even yelled, "Hey, it's the lady from that TikTok video!" I almost snorted coffee out my nose. The place she once terrorized had moved on. They'd painted over her rules, paved over her signage, and planted sunflowers where her infamous compliance rose bushes used to be. It wasn't a community anymore. It was a quiet empire. And it was mine. Later that night, I received a notification. Karen had requested a lease extension. She had no other place to go, no job, no assets, and from the records I pulled, no known relatives willing to take her in. She was stuck, in a spare bedroom, paying rent. To me. I approved the request with one click, then added a clause to the lease. Tenant agrees not to engage in any HOA-related activities, legal or symbolic, while residing on property. Just to be safe. Sleep came easy that night. At first, I half expected her to flee. I figured she'd last maybe a week, 10 days tops, before that iron ego cracked, and she bolted to live out the rest of her shame in some off-grid RV park in Arizona. But no, Karen stayed. She didn't just stay. She nested. By the end of her second week in the spare bedroom, she had brought in 2 lamps, a 3-tier bookshelf, and a fake potted plant that looked like it had seen better decades. Every morning at 7 sharp, she'd emerge into the shared kitchen, hair perfectly set, dressed like she had an appointment with destiny, even if her calendar was emptier than a politician's promises. She tried to act like it was still her house. I saw the signs immediately. Passive-aggressive post-it notes on the fridge. Friendly reminders about dishes. Once, she left a printed HOA-style warning on the bathroom mirror about excessive steam during showers. The irony almost made me choke. The other tenants weren't amused. I got texts within days. This lady keeps walking through the hall taking notes. Did you know she unplugged the Wi-Fi because someone used too much bandwidth watching a reality show? And the best one, she asked me to attend a mandatory tenant meeting in the living room next Thursday. Said there'd be muffins. I let it play out. Curiosity mostly. I wanted to see how long it would take before the tenants revolted. It didn't take long. The first mini-mutiny happened when she tried to enforce a quiet hours policy between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. without consulting anyone. She even printed faux citations for 2 renters who played a board game after 10. They laughed in her face, and one of them ripped the paper in half mid-sentence. Karen stood there, frozen, like someone had just short-circuited her firmware. The next morning, I received a formal complaint from Karen Sifi. She accused the tenants of insubordination and requested disciplinary action. I replied with a 3-word email. "You're a tenant." She didn't respond, but she wasn't finished. A few days later, Karen showed up at a community forum hosted at the local library. It was an open mic night of sorts, focused on neighborhood stories. She asked for time to speak her truth. Nobody expected her to stand up there with a trembling voice and talk about how her life was stolen, how she was unjustly criminalized, and how she was now renting a bedroom in her own home, stripped of dignity. She never once mentioned her charges, not the harassment, not the forged liens she used to pressure her old neighbors. Just tears, trembling hands, and cherry-picked trauma. She even dropped my name in that soft, tragic whisper. He bought it all. Even me. The performance was as manipulative as it was well-rehearsed. And people bit. Some attendees nodded along. An elderly woman patted her arm afterward. One man stood and said, "It's time we ask questions about property seizures and investor monopolies." I knew this game. Sympathy first, then rage, then leverage. Within 48 hours, a local YouTube journalist, one of those hungry, always has a GoPro types, uploaded a video titled, "I Lost My Home While I Was in Prison, the Karen Bradshaw Story." It was edited like a war documentary. Black and white clips, melancholy piano, close-ups of her blinking solemnly on a park bench. It went viral, mostly because people still recognized her as that Karen, the one from the courtroom clips, the one who went full meltdown in that HOA deposition video with over 8 million views. The comments were brutal. "She's back. I thought she got deported to LinkedIn. This woman tried to fine my grandma for hanging laundry. She deserves nothing. I live in that house now. The kitchen smells like vinegar and control issues." But Karen wasn't reading the comments. Or if she was, she pretended not to care. Because now she had a mission again. She reached out to a local podcaster, then a student journalist, then some blogger with a Patreon full of conspiracy theories about property conglomerates. She painted herself as the symbol of overreach, of loss, of cancel culture. She started using words like gentrification, carceral capitalism, and neighborhood displacement. And then came him. George. I hadn't thought about George in years. He was Karen's second in command during her HOA reign. A man who used to take code enforcement strolls in golf polos and moccasins, like he was patrolling for weeds and crime simultaneously. He had vanished after her arrest, sold his house, left no trace. Now, here he was, at her side. In the background of a new video, nodding solemnly while Karen explained how the HOA system had been manipulated by external investors and that residents like herself were now marginalized in their own communities. They held a small press event, 3 folding chairs in the local park, and live-streamed it on Karen's freshly rebranded Facebook page. Reclaim Our Streets. 10 people watched live, but the replay? Over 30,000 views by morning. It started to bother me, not because I feared public opinion, please, but because I knew Karen's playbook. She didn't care about reform. She was building a platform. She was inching her way toward relevance again. And George had always been good with numbers, spreadsheets, leaks. There was no way they didn't know about my holdings, about the media rights, about the option deal I signed with a major studio 6 months ago to develop my version of the story. They were getting too close. It was time to light a match. I knew the exact moment the game changed. It was when Karen looked into the camera during that live stream and, with practiced sincerity, said, "Some people think you can buy a community like it's a shopping list, but you can't buy respect. You can't buy integrity." Cute. Really. George, standing behind her like a solemn scarecrow in a fleece vest, nodded at the line like it was Shakespeare. It would have been laughable if it weren't such an obvious escalation. They were testing boundaries, seeing how far they could push before I pushed back, which, frankly, was adorable. I didn't respond publicly. Not yet. That's not my style. You don't win wars by tweeting into the wind. You win them by building traps so elegant your enemies mistake them for invitations. So I made a few calls. One of them was to a friend named Jenna, a freelance actor/content creator who'd worked with me during a previous project involving a corporate sting operation. She had a talent for slipping into roles like silk gloves. I gave her a script and told her to be subtle, sympathetic, exactly the kind of internet truth-teller Karen had been craving. We created an identity for her. Lexi Jane. anti-corporate blogger, self-proclaimed advocate for forgotten homeowners, and host of the live stream show Voice of the Displaced. We let the algorithm do its thing. Within 3 days, Lexi Jane reached out to Karen. Kind words, a profile photo of a rescue dog, a sprinkle of hashtags like Community First and The Land Back. Karen bit like it was a crab cake on Easter. Their live stream was scheduled for Sunday night. I set an alert. I watched it unfold live, feet on the coffee table, sipping a bourbon old-fashioned like I was tuning into a reality show, which, in a way, I was. Lexi began gently, almost reverently. Karen, your story resonates with so many people. Tell me, what's it like being erased from your own home? Karen, full of righteous fire now, didn't hold back. Oh, it's not just erasure, she said. It's invasion. This man, this petty little tech clown, used his money to rewrite reality. I built that community. I upheld its standards. I protected it. And now I'm portrayed as the villain? Lexi nodded solemnly, pushed her glasses up. Karen continued, voice rising. He's not just buying property. He's buying narratives. He's paying off platforms, shaping public memory. And the worst part? He thinks this makes him some sort of hero. He's a parasite with a god complex. I paused the stream for a second. Rewound. Parasite with a god complex. That was the phrase I needed. I clipped it, time-stamped it, archived it in 4 locations. Everything she said from that point on was gold. Unfiltered accusations, defamatory statements, unsubstantiated claims about bribery and media corruption. She even implied I'd manipulated the justice system to put her behind bars. A wild claim with zero basis, and one that could have cost her dearly even if I weren't already recording. Lexi closed the stream with an emotional plea about taking back the voice of the community. Karen signed off with a self-satisfied smile, not realizing she'd just walked into a trap with both pumps on. The next morning, my legal team drafted the claim: defamation of character, malicious misrepresentation, and violation of previously signed NDA clauses. It was airtight. Karen's live stream had referenced the very events already optioned for exclusive adaptation. That was breach of contract, twice over. The notice was delivered the same evening. Karen went live again the next day, this time on her personal account, her tone frantic, defensive. She claimed she was being silenced, that this was evidence of the very suppression she'd spoken about. Her comments section exploded, but not in her favor. People brought receipts. One guy dug up the HOA meeting where she threatened to fine a war veteran for putting up a flag before Memorial Day. Another linked to the infamous 12-minute video of her berating a teenage lifeguard for inconsistent poolside etiquette. The hashtags turned mocking: Karen Unplugged, Queen of HOA, Parasitic God Complex. Then came the article in Baytown Dispatch, a long-form exposé titled Redemption or Rebranding? The Weaponization of Victimhood in Karen Bradshaw's Return to Relevance. I didn't write it, but I did give the reporter full access to public HOA records from the years Karen reigned, along with permission to reproduce my legal filings regarding the Netflix adaptation. It was all technically public information anyway. I just streamlined it. Karen's meltdown was slow but satisfying. Her support base shrank. George stopped appearing in videos. A week later, Lexi posted a final follow-up vlog titled The Danger of False Narratives in Advocacy. She never mentioned Karen by name. She didn't have to. And me? I remained quiet until the studio called. The story rights had been finalized, and production had moved ahead of schedule, thanks to the spike in interest around Karen's live streams. Her outburst had done more to promote the project than any marketing team could have dreamed of. Best part? The line she screamed, "He's a parasite with a god complex," was now the tagline of the official teaser trailer. For the first time in weeks, things went quiet. No live streams, no tragic piano montages, no public sob stories in park benches. Karen had gone radio silent. I knew better than to assume surrender. Silence, for her, wasn't retreat. It was recalibration. She resurfaced exactly 11 days later. I got a notification from a news aggregation bot I'd set up to monitor her online footprint. The headline read, "Reborn. Ex-HOA president launches healing podcast about women and the system." New name, new brand. Same Karen. Except now, she was Rachel Skye. The promo image showed her in soft focus, wrapped in a beige cardigan, holding a ceramic mug that probably said something like, "Live, laugh, litigate." The tagline beneath it, "I'm not here to complain, I'm here to heal." Her first episode dropped that night. It was titled, "Voiceless, a journey from control to compassion." She avoided names, she avoided dates, but the subtext was obvious. I spent years living by the rules, enforcing them, until those same rules turned on me, until I became a cautionary tale in a system that loves to build up women just to punish them for being loud. She layered her new persona like a master. Soft lighting, serene background music, carefully chosen phrases like patriarchal zoning codes and emotional foreclosure. It was manipulative brilliance. She didn't just want sympathy anymore. She wanted a fan base, and she started to get one. At first, just a handful of wellness junkies and pseudo-academic bloggers who loved redemption arcs. But then the TikTok clips started. One featured her walking slowly along a garden path in slow motion while her voice played over the footage. "They took my house, but not my voice." The video cracked 50,000 views in 2 days. By the end of the week, she was doing interviews, always as Rachel, never as Karen, and dropping just enough cryptic comments to keep the mystery alive. Let's just say I used to be someone else, someone who believed in order, who thought rules made things safe. But sometimes rules become cages. And then, just like that, the account disappeared. Banned. The explanation was simple. TikTok's content recognition algorithm had flagged the face. Despite the filters, makeup, and post-processing, the system cross-referenced her old media, court appearances, news reports, even mugshots, and confirmed that Rachel Skye was none other than Karen Bradshaw, the subject of an active intellectual property contract tied to an exclusive adaptation deal. The system did what I didn't have to lift a finger for. It erased her again. The fallout hit fast. Her small but noisy fan base cried foul. Digital oppression. They're silencing survivors. A couple influencers even tried to rally behind her, until someone dug up her HOA footage again. Within hours, a supercut dropped on YouTube titled "Rachel Skye Was a Tyrant: The Karen Bradshaw Files." It was brutal. Split-screen edits, dramatic piano music, courtroom clips, and her infamous "Your lawn is a disgrace to the community" meltdown from the 2019 4th of July meeting. She tried to pivot, claimed in an Instagram story that the video was deep-faked and corporate propaganda. But at this point, the narrative was out of her hands. She wasn't just infamous anymore, she was intellectual property. My legal team issued a cease and desist to the podcast platform, not only for violating the exclusivity clause of the media rights, but also for misrepresenting factual events already under dramatized portrayal. The terms were simple: remove the content or get sued into oblivion. They folded. Her entire digital identity as Rachel Skye, deleted, scrubbed, archived only in memes and reaction videos. She tried going live on Facebook again, ranting in real time about media control, about surveillance capitalism, about how even your own story can be taken from you. It went viral for the wrong reasons. People weren't moved. They were entertained. Her outraged rants were turned into remixes, TikTok duets, even a trap remix titled Rules Become Cages, Karen's Lament, that racked up over 1 million plays on SoundCloud. But then she crossed the final line. During one particularly heated live stream, Karen walked through the house with her phone on selfie mode, loudly accusing other tenants of conspiring against her. She filmed them without permission, naming names, shoving doors open. She even turned the camera toward a bathroom door and yelled, "You think I don't know what you're doing in there?" Within an hour, I had 3 separate tenants forward the footage to our property management company. That was all I needed. Clause 17 of the lease agreement. Tenant shall not conduct any live broadcasts or recordings of other tenants or shared property without written consent. Violation constitutes immediate termination of lease. The eviction notice was served the next morning. I didn't do it with joy. I did it with precision. Karen didn't take it well. She screamed at the delivery agent, threatened legal action, claimed harassment. But the facts were the facts. Her lease was terminated, her access code revoked, and by sunset, she was gone. No goodbye post, no dramatic exit monologue, just a rusty red sedan piled high with luggage, peeling out of the driveway with all the grace of a burning parade float. And, like that, she was off the board again. For now. 2 weeks passed. No sign of her. I thought she might have finally burned through her last bridge, her last rebrand, her last ounce of fake humility. I even started to feel a little disappointed. After all, what was chess without the other player? But Karen doesn't go quietly. That's not in her DNA. She came back the only way she knew how. With a surprise. It happened on a Tuesday. My assistant forwarded me a press inquiry from a Netflix producer I'd never spoken to before. Nothing strange about that. We had dozens of people cycling through the studio pipeline. But this email was different. The subject line, Cooperative source offers exclusive character backstory. Unseen material, and in the body. We've been contacted by someone claiming to have original HOA documents, private correspondence, and unrecorded meeting transcripts involving Karen Bradshaw. The material includes handwritten notes, early drafts of community guidelines, and private journals. They're willing to negotiate exclusive rights. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. It didn't take long to confirm the source. George. Of course it was George. The same George who'd stood behind Karen during her comeback attempt. The same George who helped her with those polished videos and public appearances. Who nodded through every monologue like a faithful disciple. He was her fixer, her cameraman, her only remaining loyalist. And now? He was selling her out for a check. The studio looped me in. I gave my blessing. The documents were real. Notes written in Karen's rigid cursive. HOA policy drafts filled with obsessive corrections. Even a few pages from a personal diary where she described the burden of maintaining moral superiority over lazy neighbors. It was comedy gold. One page included a hand-drawn lawn compliance scoring chart with categories like edge line integrity and shade-to-grass ratio. Another described a plan to create a holiday light certification process that would require pre-approval of themes and luminance. It was like stepping into the mind of a bureaucratic Bond villain. And then came the real prize, a recorded audio file, George had apparently worn a wire during one of their recent strategy sessions. The file captured Karen ranting about how she would force Netflix to buy her out by staging a harassment campaign. She outlined plans to stage another eviction, provoke press coverage, and claim she was being digitally erased as a modern-day witch hunt victim. The studio bought everything. George signed a waiver, collected his check, and disappeared like a rat through drywall. The story team went wild. The audio would be turned into an animated segment. The diary entries would form the backbone of a new episode, tentatively titled, Behind the Blazer, The Mind of Karen B. The documents were already being cataloged and adapted into supporting content for the marketing rollout. Collectibles, companion books, even a potential board game spin-off. Karen didn't just lose the narrative, she became the content. Of course, she tried to fight back. She posted a furious screed on Medium.com under the pseudonym Just a Woman, accusing George of betrayal, Netflix of story laundering, and me, naturally, of running a psyop to erase powerful women. The post barely got traction. 10 comments, half of them bots. Then she went after George directly. Publicly accused him of theft, claimed he forged the materials. He responded not with a statement, but with a 30-second TikTok. He sat in a lawn chair, holding a copy of the check, sipping a piña colada with a smug smile, and the caption, Sometimes the HOA isn't the villain. Sometimes it's just Karen. The video hit 2 million views in 48 hours. Karen filed a complaint, tried to get him banned. TikTok responded by verifying his account. She was drowning. I didn't say a word. I just kept watching the metrics. Pre-orders for the streaming doc tripled that week. The trailer was re-edited to include snippets of George's recording and one of Karen's infamous quotes. I wasn't cruel. I was correct. The tagline under it? Correct according to who? Beautiful. The studio's PR team sent me a congratulatory gift basket shaped like a gavel. It came with a note. For the man who owns the verdict, the property, and the plot. At that point, even if Karen had launched a full legal offensive, she wouldn't have had the money, the credibility, or the bandwidth. Her public identity was now legally licensed by a streaming giant. Her past belonged to my attorneys. Her legacy was a punchline printed on T-shirts. And yet, something told me she wasn't done. No, not Karen. People like her don't vanish. They just go underground. Until they think they've found another way back in. The premiere was held at a rooftop venue in downtown Los Angeles. Open bar, string lights, and more influencers than air molecules. I arrived fashionably late, not because I wanted attention, but because I knew it would annoy the people whose names were nowhere near the title screen. Security handed me a VIP badge shaped like a miniature HOA citation. Nice touch. Netflix had gone all in. The red carpet was printed to look like a suburban cul-de-sac. The backdrop was a mock front porch with a plastic picket fence and a mailbox labeled Property of E. Monroe. Someone had even dressed a French bulldog in a tiny sweater that read, Neighborhood Compliance Officer. The series title splashed across every screen in bold serif. Karen, Order, Obsession, and the Suburb That Fought Back. The trailer played on loop overhead. Karen's face, smiling, judging, unraveling. George's voiceover clipped between confessionals and HOA bodycam footage. A moody score hummed underneath, while quotes popped on screen like crime scene evidence. I wasn't cruel. I was correct. You can't let people decorate however they want. It's anarchy. If you want freedom, move to the woods. Inside the screening room, The crowd settled. I sat in the second row next to the executive producer, who whispered, "You've created a villain for the ages." I smiled but didn't answer. The lights dimmed. Episode 1 opened with footage of Karen in her glory days, walking a neighborhood she thought she owned, clipboard in hand, face full of self-importance. Then came the cut to her mugshot. Black and white. Slowly zooming in as ominous music built behind it. The audience gasped. Someone laughed. Someone else said, "No way that's real." And then came the narration. She ruled by code. She fined by fear. Until someone bought the rule book, the block, and her house. Cut to me in a sleek interview setting, sipping coffee and saying, "I didn't plan to own a neighborhood. I just didn't want her to own me." Applause. That night, Twitter lit up like a Christmas parade. Memes, quotes, remixes, side-by-side comparison videos of Karen versus famous movie villains. Even a trending tag. Karen was correct. Used ironically by people posting screenshots of HOA letters from their own neighborhoods. And then, just after midnight, something I hadn't expected. A formal cease and desist. From Karen. Well, technically from Bradshaw Legal Restoration LLC, a one-person operation based out of a UPS mailbox in Glendale. She claimed the show misrepresented her human essence, violated her spiritual identity, and commercialized a woman's trauma for profit. The irony? Her likeness had been sold legally, contractually, and in some jurisdictions, hilariously. We responded within the hour. My attorney's reply was concise. Per previously executed waivers and intellectual property transfers, Ms. Bradshaw has no legal claim to the depiction, representation, or mimetic usage of her name, voice, image, or story. Any further contact will be considered harassment and subject to penalties. She replied with a Facebook post, just a grainy image of a rose bush and the caption, "Once I grew beauty. Now they sell my thorns." One of the commenters asked if she was okay. Another replied, "She thinks she's Shakespeare, but she's just suburban Voldemort." Over 10,000 likes. The studio ran with it. By morning, they'd launched a new line of promo material. Karen's Thorn. Limited edition wine, red blend, aggressively dry. The tagline, "Pairs well with rules and regrets." George had his own moment of glory, too. A short documentary titled The Lieutenant, premiered on the streamer's documentary channel. Half confessional, half exposé. He even got invited to speak at a panel on neighborhood tyranny and the weaponization of civility. I'm pretty sure he only did it for the craft services. As for me, I stayed quiet. Success doesn't need to shout. It just needs syndication. Within 2 weeks, the show was renewed for a second season. The studio greenlit companion content, a satirical HOA simulator game, an audiobook narrated by a very smug-sounding George, and a line of novelty t-shirts that read, "I survived the HOA. All I got was this lawsuit." Karen, meanwhile, drifted further into the digital fog. Her Facebook posts became increasingly poetic, increasingly incoherent. She started referencing Greek mythology. One ended with the phrase, "Prometheus brought fire. I brought uniform mailbox design." She wasn't even angry anymore. She was just a character. Now, an archive. A walking meme with copyright tags. A year passed. The series was a hit. Not just a hit. A phenomenon. It got the Emmy nod, the streaming numbers, the Reddit fan theories. They even ran a parody sketch on Saturday Night Live, where a version of Karen led a HOA tribunal against Santa Claus for non-conforming chimney access. But that wasn't the part that stuck with me. What stuck was how quiet the neighborhood had become. Maple Grove, once a battlefield of passive-aggressive newsletters and overwatered lawns, now felt like an actual place to live. People smiled more. Kids played outside without being shushed for running on the common green. The HOA, if you could still call it that, had rebranded itself into a voluntary community board. No fines, no citations, just neighbors talking like human beings. Every so often I'd walk past Karen's old rose bushes, now wildly overgrown, untamed, and somehow more beautiful that way. A tenant had let them grow free on purpose, said it was a tribute to chaotic floral justice. Whatever that means. As for Karen, she resurfaced once, not in person, in a satire TikTok. The video opened with a heavily filtered shot of a woman, definitely her, wearing a hoodie and standing in front of a gas station slushy machine. She whispered into the mic, "They took my voice, my face, my name, but they'll never take my standards." Cut to her holding a level against the machine, muttering, "This isn't aligned. It's a disgrace." The video exploded. 1.8 million views. A duet of someone dressing as a street cone and shouting, "I'm not HOA compliant," went even more viral. Within days, the studio reached out to me again. They wanted another contract. Not for drama, for comedy. A spin-off mockumentary called Karen, HOA Underground. A series that would follow a character suspiciously similar to her as she tried to establish secret homeowner rules in increasingly absurd locations. Public parks, food courts, subway stations. I signed the paperwork. Of course I did. At this point, it wasn't about revenge. It was business. And ironically, she was the gift that kept monetizing. Then, one morning, while grabbing coffee at my usual spot, I noticed something odd at the barista counter. A tip jar. But not just any tip jar. It had Karen's face on it. Big smile, bright eyes, caption, "Tip generously, or Karen will report you." I laughed so hard I had to sit down. The barista caught my eye and said, "Can you believe she used to live around here?" I just shrugged. "No idea," I said, sipping my coffee. "But she seems intense." Later that day, I walked past a group of teens doing a mock HOA skit on the sidewalk. One of them pointed at a trash can and shouted, "That bin is 2 inches from regulation. Get the clipboard." Another collapsed in mock horror. And in that moment, surrounded by sunlight, laughter, and a faint smell of overwatered petunias, I realized something. Karen didn't just lose. She became immortal. Not as the voice of control, not as a champion of order, but as the cautionary tale people laughed about at brunch, as the villain who tried to control the world and got turned into a coffee mug. As I strolled back home through streets that once bent under her iron smile, I couldn't help but grin. She wanted a legacy. She got one.
This story isn't just a tale of revenge. It's a study in power, narrative, and control. What happens when the enforcer of rules becomes the object of satire and the aggressor becomes commodified content? Karen's downfall is both operatic and strategic. Once the tyrannical head of an HOA, she ends up renting a room in the very house she used to rule, owned by the man she tried to destroy. But is poetic justice enough? Or does her relentless need to reclaim relevance reveal something deeper? About how some people can't exist without control. The protagonist doesn't simply retaliate, he monetizes her legacy. Instead of confronting her directly, he lets her unravel in public. Is this cruelty or a masterclass in restraint? Would you have resisted the urge to humiliate her openly or followed the same path of quiet, calculated revenge? Karen's repeated rebrands, from victim to podcast host to Rachel Skye, ask us to examine, when does rebranding become manipulation? And why do audiences so easily fall for redemption arcs, even when the underlying behavior hasn't changed. Her final mistake? Thinking the internet would rally to her side. But virality doesn't guarantee sympathy. It only guarantees exposure. As her every pivot becomes meme fodder, she loses the very thing she once demanded: respect. Yet perhaps the most disturbing thread is this: Karen may have been dethroned, but in being turned into content, a show, a meme, a cultural trope, she became immortal. The very empire she built to control others now controls her image. This story teaches that unchecked control may win you power, but never loyalty. And when you abuse authority, the backlash doesn't just silence you, it turns you into a warning label. Respect, once lost, can't be rebranded.